Thank you. Thank you all very much for coming, and it's a privilege to be asked by Becky to come and do this. So I'm Sarah, I'm a nurse consultant in medicine emergency care. I also have a few hats, so I'm the Trust Corporate Lead for Advanced Practice, and I'm also a professional violinist, which is my favourite job. I suppose it's probably a little bit interesting, my story, because I haven't progressed up through what you would call typical routes in nursing, and I don't come from a typical family background as well, which I'll go into shortly. So just to reiterate, these are the hats that I wear in life, as I would see. So I'm a nurse and I have my professional responsibilities. I'm a mum, and that comes first. So I've got 2 children. I've got Luke, who you see here. This was when he was actually only 15. Luke's now 6'6" and 21-year-old. And then I've got a little 9-year-old. And I'm also a violinist, and I play many of our local and regional amateur and professional orchestras. So this is me as a kid. And the 2 little ones on the left-hand side, that's me and my sister Michelle. I'm the oldest of 4, so there's me, Michelle, Hannah and Matthew. And me and my sister Michelle, there's only 20 months between us, and we're more like best friends, and we still are now. And all of us live in and out of each other's pockets, so our kids are more like siblings, and I come from a really quite big family. My mum's mum and dad were Romani gypsies and moved to Halifax when they were quite young. So I come from a travelling community, and so family is very important. Having said that, when we talk, and I think you learn, when you're a child, you know what you know, and you don't know any different, and you think that that's normal. When you're older and you learn about adverse childhood events, what we call ACEs, there was many. Our childhood was quite difficult. Probably, if it was today, I don't think that us 4 would have stayed in my mum's care. I think we probably would have been placed somewhere else. So it was quite a difficult childhood. With being the oldest, I had to look after everybody, I suppose, make sure everybody had the clean uniforms, that there was milk in the fridge, that there was other things that you think are normal, but as you get older, you realise are not normal. Adversely, that puts quite a lot of stress on you as a child, and academically at school, I really enjoyed school. But the thing I loved was music. So we did go to the Girls' Brigade, and I got picked to play the recorder. So I was only about 7 when I first started playing the recorder, and very quickly progressed with the recorder to the point that I was doing the lessons in our primary school. So I got up to my grade 4 on descant recorder by within about 9 months of starting learning. And then I started watching. We had, do you know, the old videos that you put in, and we had Fantasia, and I loved it. Absolutely loved Walt Disney's Fantasia. I loved the music, I loved the animation, I could see the pictures in my head, and I just knew that that's what I had to do. Then my cousin came and slept at our house, and she had a violin, and I hated her for it. I was so jealous. I really wanted a violin, really wanted a violin, to the point that anybody who knows me, I wouldn't be rude or offend people or ever have malice intent, but I'm not shy of coming forward if I want something or doing the right thing. So this is one of the most important adults in my childhood. When I was in year 5, so 8, 9-year-old, Mr. Kennedy was the violin teacher that used to teach violin at White House Primary School, and I walked in mid-lesson and said, I want to play the violin, how do you sort it? And I started playing the violin next week. Now, back in the 90s, Tees Valley Music Service, there wasn't a cost. So my mum was on benefits. We had free school meals. We didn't have very much money growing up. So you were eligible for free instrumental lessons and the loan of instruments. So there was never a cost attached with playing the violin for me. And within a few weeks of starting, you initially started in a group, so there was about 3 or 4 of you, but within about 3 or 4 weeks, I was in a lesson on my own. And there was the flexibility back then, where if, like Mr. Kennedy would say, and we're still in contact now, we still see each other regularly, if you've got a good kid, you can put the time into them. So I used to regularly have 1 hour lessons. In addition to being my violin teacher, he looked after me, and unbeknown to me, until I was much older, probably in my 30s, the Tees Valley Music Service used to donate presents and gifts and food parcels to our family. They also used to arrange lifts for me to get to orchestra. I was the only kid in the whole orchestra who never had anybody there in the audience, because my mum just never came and she had another 3 kids at home and nobody was really interested. So they kind of wrapped themselves around me and made sure I was okay. So I was in Tees Valley Youth Orchestra, and despite having not very much money and my mum not being able to afford it, I went on numerous tours throughout Europe that I didn't know at the time, but that was funded by Tees Valley Music Service. I also was given the violin that I still play today. So they had specials. So these are higher quality instruments for children that, whatever reason, they can't buy their own instrument, that are doing the higher grade. So I did my grade 5 in year 8, and then I did my grade 8 in year 10 at school. And so for me to do my, I skipped quite a few grades. For me to do my grade 8, Mr. Kennedy, my violin teacher, got me one of the special TVMS violins, and there wasn't even a comparison. And then he taught me violin from being about 8 to being about 18 till when I finished college. And we used to do loads of sneaky things like double cooking. So we used to plan my violin lessons for the double cooking. And actually I played a concert only a few weeks ago. Mrs. Lincoln, who was the music teacher at school, she was actually there, and I haven't seen her since I left school. So they all knew it was happening and just used to let it happen. And the music department at school was my sanctuary. It was the safe place. It was the place that I honestly don't think that I would have survived being able to be a functioning adult without having music in my life. So at 18 I ended up pregnant and got kicked out of the National Youth Orchestra for this, because you've got to remember most of these people are affluent, private schools, private music lessons, and I obviously wasn't. I was working at McDonald's. I worked at McDonald's from the age 16 till the age of 20, and I really enjoyed working at McDonald's, and it taught me many of my life skills that actually I use even to this day. Customers who are upset with their orders, or really busy times of day where you have to prioritise what you're doing and when you're doing. So it taught me lots of life skills that probably other people may have been taught in the childhood, but we didn't have that opportunity to be taught them. So it really shaped and developed me. So the pictures on here are Luke when he was first born. So Luke was £6'4" when he was born, and I had him when I was 19-year-old, and that's at my 21st birthday party with Luke, who was about 15 months old at the time. I moved out when I was just turned 20. I got a council house in Hardwick in Stockton, and that's where Luke and I were. So it was, even then, it was really quite difficult. When Luke was born, even from being a child, I always knew I wanted to be a nurse. So when people say, what do you want to do when you're older? I always knew that I wanted to go into nursing, always. When Luke was born, it kind of brought things back into focus. What I absolutely knew was that I did not want him to have the life that I had had, and I wanted him to have every opportunity to flourish and prosper, and give him the opportunity to do things that I didn't get to do as a child. So it refocused, and I needed to seriously look at, how do I get into nursing? Now, when I was at college, I had done A-levels. So I'd done A-levels in psychology, biology, chemistry and maths. But actually at the time, nursing was only a diploma. You only needed your GCSEs. And I had done well at GCSE as well. So got into nurse training at Teesside University. And so I started my nurse training almost exactly a year to the day that Luke was born. I absolutely loved being a student nurse. It was the best time of my life. I've made some of my best friends that I'm still really good friends with now. I learned so much, not just in academically or about your career, but other life skills that I hadn't necessarily been able to have as a child. I also built support systems. So I think probably my very first placement was on Ward 25 at North Tees, which was a cardiology ward. And I'd not long moved out of home and was in my new house, but we didn't have a sofa. We literally didn't have, and we had like camping chairs to sit on. So the ward manager on Ward 25 gave me her sofa. She was getting a new sofa. They just arranged it, and it was delivered. And so I felt like I then had people that I could go to if there was difficulties, when you don't have somebody that you can do that to at home. And anyway, training flew by. I only ever did my nurse training to be a midwife. That's what I wanted to be. I knew I wanted to be a nurse or a midwife, and by the time I'd started my training, I was probably pretty certain that I wanted to be a midwife. But what I didn't factor in was the fact that I'd get put on a placement in second year in A&E at North Tees, and I loved it. And then there was no turning back. I absolutely knew that I wanted to be an A&E nurse. I had a break in playing the violin at this time, so I didn't play between the ages of 19 and about 22. And part of that was because I was miffed off because I'd been kicked out because I was pregnant at 18, and I just thought, well, stuff yous. And also, I didn't have enough time. I was a young single mum who was a student nurse, and any free time I wanted to go out with my friends. If I had a babysitter, I didn't want to be going to orchestra and things. So that's the only break in music that I've ever had. So newly qualified nurse, so qualified in January 2007, and I got a job in North Tees A&E. I absolutely loved it. It was everything that I imagined and more. It was, I couldn't believe my luck that I had actually got a job in A&E, because when we qualified, there wasn't any jobs, so we had to go on like the bank, a long-term bank, and then get placed in areas. But within 3 months, me and my friend Lisa, who got jobs there as newly qualified nurses, had permanent contracts. And while I was there, I did my top-up degree, because it was advanced diploma when I did my pre-registration course. My mentoring in practice, so that I could have student nurses working alongside me. And when I'd only been qualified 10 months, did my advanced life support and got instructor potential, so was put forward to be an ALS instructor when I hadn't even been qualified a year. I waited for another 18 months and then went and did my GIC course, which is the course that you can teach advanced life support courses, which feeds into the work that I do now. I still teach advanced life support, been teaching advanced life support for 16 years. Also teach HMIMS more recently over the last 2 years, but that GIC course that I did back in 2008 transfers over and it spans your career. But I still had a niggle that I wanted to be a midwife, and I just couldn't get rid of this thought. And I was coming up to about 3 years qualified, and I thought, if I don't go and do my midwifery now, then I'm never going to do it. So I kind of half-heartedly applied and thought, oh, well, I probably won't get in because the demand's really high for the 18-month conversion course. But I did get in. And so it was a big upheaval, and I thought, I'm going to just have to do it. And I hated it. So I started being a student midwife in January 2010, didn't even finish the course. Did the first 10 months of the 18-month programme, absolutely knew that midwifery was not for me and that I did not want to work back in midwifery. And I can't really explain that any different other than, I suppose it's a bit like when you go to see a new house, you walk in and you know. And you walk in some houses and you know this is not right. But I did learn lots of knowledge and skills that were transferable, because in ED ED. We looked after children, babies, pregnant women, so there was lots of transferable skills. So I learned lots in my midwifery training. So that's how I ended up at James Cook. So at the time, so in 2011, Hartlepool Accident and Emergency Department was closing. So what they were doing is amalgamating Hartlepool and North Tees staff, and this was at a time when there was very few nursing jobs anyway, and basically there wasn't any room for me to go back to a substantive post. I'd been kept on a 0 hours contract, but they weren't able to continue that anymore. So I knew I wanted to be back in the emergency department, so I applied to James Cook A&E and thankfully got a 3-month temporary contract as a Band 5 staff nurse and started at James Cook in December of 2010, and I loved it. I knew again this was definitely where I wanted to be, 100% wanted to work in A&E. Again, met some of my best friends for life, had lots of opportunities for development. So within 12 months of going there as a Band 5 staff nurse, I was a Band 7 nurse practitioner, but this was back, so this was late 2011, I went into a nurse practitioner post. This was back when it was quite unusual for nurse practitioners to see major patients, and there was 3 of us that were in post, 1 for paediatrics, 2 for adults, and we were the only 3 people in the region that were nurse practitioners who saw major patients. Now with this, we knew what the risks were involved, and we had very good support from our consultant colleagues. And so we had to build our own governance around the role and our own clinical portfolios and make sure that what we were doing, we were practicing safely and that we were recognising our own learning and development needs and I suppose embedding that service, because there was some consultants that at the time quite sceptical about nurse practitioners, even within ED, working in the way that we were working. I think it speaks for itself now when our emergency department would not run without ACPs and nurse practitioners. So thinking back to 13, 14 years ago, there wasn't a nurse practitioner in our emergency department, and we set up and developed that service so that the service is dependent on nurse practitioners. It just would not run without the nurse practitioners now, so that's really successful. I had the opportunity, because I'd gone into a nurse practitioner post, to do my non-medical prescribing, my clinical skills, continued teaching advanced life support, and in 2016 was asked by our general manager at the time so this was October 2016, was asked if I would go on secondment for 6 months to acute medicine to set up a nurse practitioner service within acute. It was successful. Within about 3 months of being there, they didn't want the nurse practitioners that had gone around to set up the service to leave. And there was further recruitment and development of the nurse practitioner service within acute. And again, today, acute would not run without the nurse practitioners that work in that service. They're an absolute pivotal role within that service. Between October 2016 and March 2020, I worked between acute and ED, doing 6 months acute, 6 months ED, which I really liked actually. It was really helpful for how the pathways feed into each other, and I could, in ED, I could manage and turn around patients to discharge them safely with the knowledge that I brought from acute, but also could bring the knowledge from ED into acute. So I really enjoyed that. However, COVID happened. This was complete strip down. Didn't matter what your role was. It mattered what knowledge and skills you had to look after our patients safely. That's when I formally started contributing to the acute medical registrar rota, and that was an ask of the acute consultants. And Ward 15 was changed into COVID resus, so there was negative pressure bays. And it was very sharp learning curve. Obviously, it was a new virus that not very many of us knew about. It was really awful to manage some of the patients that were coming in, especially when the families weren't there with them. But there was additional things that I needed to undertake. So undertaking do not attempt CPR orders on patients, being the senior decision maker there, I did permanent twilights. So actually it helped to grow and develop my confidence, but also made me more aware of what the opportunities were for other non-medical roles that could work in what would have historically been a medical role, but also what the flaws and the gaps were and how to make sure that patients were safe when you were doing that. I also, whilst I was working between A&E and acute, got the opportunity to go as the first cohort to do my Masters in Advanced Clinical Practice on the apprentice route. And that was great because there was no way that I had the money to be able to self-fund a Masters. It just wasn't possible. I was on my own with 2 kids. And so that was a really good opportunity that I grabbed with both of my hands, and that was a really, really good opportunity. I kind of became the unofficial person that people go to for anything advanced practice within front of house, and to the point that I had our deputy chief nurse at the time coming to me to ask me about what my opinion was on X, Y and Z, and what do you think we should do about this? What do you have you got any ideas? Finished my Masters successfully. And just before, so I finished my Masters in October 2021, and in the summer, a chance meeting with somebody who I looked after as a patient brought about an opportunity. And I was asked if I would apply for the trust lead for advanced practice. And to be honest, it was not at all where I saw my career going. I was always very clinical and still am now. But going into a corporate role, no, that wasn't for me. However, the more I thought about it, what I felt like was that I didn't always feel heard. And I wasn't put in the right arenas to be able to influence and drive the change that needs to happen with advanced practice. So I kind of thought, well, it's a secondment, so I'll still have my substantive post. And I applied, was successful, and was in post within 6 weeks. I didn't really know what was happening, to be honest. It happened that quickly. That was a massive, steep learning curve. But as I did think, put me in the places with the right opportunities to not only further my own career and development, but also to help others. So other people who may not have had a voice or felt heard, to be able to give a platform for people to demonstrate the good work. There's absolutely loads of fantastic work that goes on across the trust, and it's sometimes just that people aren't in the right position to have the right audience or the right platform to be able to bring that into fruition. So it's a picture of Andrea in the middle. Andrea is one of our nurse practitioners. She's just left the organisation actually. But Andrea had done a really, really good piece of work over COVID about assumed knowledge. And basically she'd set up a Facebook group, a teaching, an emergency department teaching group, which I think's got 16,000 members now. And it all came about because she'd asked a healthcare assistant if they would do a line and standing blood pressure. And they said to Andrea, "What do you mean a line and standing blood pressure? We talk in a language that we assume other people understand, and they don't." So that was the ethos, that's what the teaching page was for. And that really flourished. And so put Andrea with the right connections to be able to use this work to contribute as her research project within a Masters, and to develop a poster presentation to take to regional conference to showcase her work. And that's probably one of the best things that I feel like I've done. Is it's nice when you help other people to be able to, because you know how fantastic they are, but they're not always in a position where other people can see that. I'll go back to music. This is why I can't do career without music, because they're so massively intertwined with each other. I didn't realise how much until COVID happened and there was an 18-month break because we couldn't go to orchestra, we couldn't play. And even then for about a year after, it was socially distancing, it wasn't the same as it used to be. I didn't realise how much it meant to me, nor did I realise the friendships that I developed, because if you think, this is quite a niche thing. So your friendships that you develop within music, no matter what's going on in your life, relationships, jobs, they're constant. And I really, really missed them through COVID. I play in quite a number of local orchestras. So I play in Cleveland Philharmonic Orchestra, play in Cleveland Chamber Orchestra, Teesside Symphony Orchestra. I play quartets, Richmond Orchestra. So I play quite a lot of orchestras, and it's really important to me. That I think that's probably the only reason that I've never had to go on antidepressants, if I'm quite honest, because that is a bit like CBT. So no matter how busy or stressful your week has been, if I'm at a rehearsal 10 till 4, I can't think about anything else. If I'm trying to play Mahler Symphony 1, I can only think about that. And then that gives you the headspace to be able to rationalise everything else that's going on. And I have to prioritise music within my life, and that's why they're so intertwined with each other. My secondment as the advanced practice lead was extended, and ultimately I think people realise how much you do when you're not there all the time anymore. So within my collaborative, a nurse consultant post went out, and I applied and was successful for that role within medicine emergency care. So I've gone back into collaborative. I'm still the trust lead for advanced practice, so it's a very busy role trying to juggle all of the responsibilities, but I really enjoy it because I've got the best of both worlds. I've got my clinical work, which is the absolute bread and butter and the backbone of my professional career, and I would never ever want to lose the clinical components within my role. But I've also got the strategic part of my role that helps to be able to shape and drive and develop the future workforce. And through my advanced practice lead role, I've been linked in with national and regional teams within NHS England and with the NMC. So I've been involved in the work with the Nurse and Midwifery Council with phase 1 and now into phase 2 of the thematic review of advanced practice and additional regulation for nurses and midwives that work at advanced levels of practice is going to be taken ahead. And there was only 20 people in that independent steering group, and we as South Tees had a chair and had a voice there, and that will hugely shape our future career. So I feel very fortunate to have had the opportunities that I have had. Most importantly is my family. So Luke is 21. Luke's got Asperger's, so it hasn't always been an easy ride with Luke, especially through his teenage years. He was school refusing throughout year 8 and year 9. Very, very academically able. He sat his GCSEs at home in year 9. But that's really stressful as a parent when your child has complex mental health needs and you don't feel like the right support is available to you, even when you know how to navigate the systems. Luke's now thankfully in a much better place, so that's good, and long may it continue. Paul, so that's me, Paul and Indy in the middle. Me and Paul have been together for 6 years, and I wish that we'd met when I was 20. Well, I don't, because then I wouldn't have the kids, but we are complete opposites of each other. Literally, I'm loud and outgoing. He's really quiet and reserved. And do you know when you meet somebody that you know that you'll stay with and that you'll grow old with, even though you annoy each other? So I'm really grateful and really thankful. And then little Indy in the middle. So I had Indy when Luke was 12, and within 6 months of having Indy, left a complex relationship that wasn't easiest of relationships to leave. So I'm really grateful actually that Luke and Indy, they've got a really close relationship. Indy, if Luke goes into shutdown, if something's happened, he's overwhelmed, she's often the only person that can get to him and reach into him, if you like. And she's the like chalk and cheese. She's extrovert on the stage, she's in professional pantomime, she's a really good dancer, not bothered about academic, just skimming along where she needs to. And Luke is the complete opposite, computer geek, very academic, so like chalk and cheese. And I'm really grateful for my family. When I was thinking about, and this was off the top of my head, if I was speaking to myself as that 18-year-old pregnant young girl with everything else and all the adversity that was going on, what would I do? What would I tell them? And I suppose it would be to set clear goals, know where you're wanting to go and set clear goals, knowing where you're heading. Also, you're not going to do everything straight away, so chunk it down, make things into manageable, bite-sized amounts of achievable progress. You don't see that always when you're younger. You know, you want to get to X, you're at X and you want to get to Y, and there's a massive gap. But actually, there's lots of little steps in between that are vital and really important, and that's okay, that's normal. Stay true to your values. So despite what's going on in your life, be a good person, stay true to your values, and don't let opportunities that you have influence the way that you behave with other people. If you've got personal and professional difficulties, we've all had ups and downs in our own lives and in our professional lives. Use it as a learning opportunity. Don't see it as a negative. Look at it as a learning opportunity and come back stronger from it. That's happened for a reason. Why did it happen? How do you make sure that doesn't happen again? And that puts you actually in a more fortuitous position. Have something that is just for you. In the midst of the chaos, absolute carnage, you have to have something that is just for you. And for me, that's being a violinist. For other people, that might be walking, that might be whatever it is that other people do. But you must have something that's for you, because otherwise you're at work all the time, and you must have a good work-life balance. You have to balance that. Be clear with people, be kind. Sometimes being clear isn't always information that people want to hear, but it's actually kinder to be clear in the first place. And try to be compassionate in all that you do. If you are having to tell somebody unwelcome news, whether that is breaking bad news with a patient, whether that is supporting a struggling trainee or whoever, even if it's news that may not be received well, you can absolutely do that in a compassionate way, and you should do that. And also, if you can help somebody, you should. We all should, shouldn't we? If we're in a position to be able to help somebody, we should. And thank you all very much for listening. I appreciate your time.